I'll never forget the day we first heard about Ridgeway. The place was everything you'd picture in an old ghost story, a quiet, dying town wrapped in this endless, heavy fog that seemed to press in on every building, every tree. You couldn't even see the tops of the old coal mines from the main road. Everything felt frozen in this constant, gray haze. Locals kept to themselves, heads down, mumbling when we walked by, but every once in a while, I'd catch someone casting a nervous glance toward the forest at the edge of town. It was that clipping that started it all. We'd found it by chance, crumpled and faded, buried under a pile of dusty old records in the back of a roadside diner. It wasn't even front-page news, just this tiny article about a curse on Ridgeway's mines, a network of tunnels that supposedly ran beneath the whole area. The story was fake, but it hinted at something far worse than just a collapse or bad working conditions. People had gone down there and never come back. Not just miners either, locals, travelers, anyone curious enough to venture too close. It was like the mines had swallowed them whole. I could see the excitement flicker in everyone's eyes. Sam, Jordan, Riley, and Casey, we were all restless, always chasing the next thrill, and this was exactly the kind of story we loved. And filming it for our channel? It was perfect. A real, forgotten horror story just waiting for us to uncover. The locals gave us cold looks when we mentioned the mine, mumbling something about shadows that had their own minds and figures that walked where no one should. That should have been enough. We should have listened, felt the chill that crept up our spines whenever they talked about those woods. But instead, we packed our cameras, lights, and flashlights and set our sights on that dark patch of forest. We stood at the entrance of the mine, all four of us just staring into that dark mouth in the earth, half excited, half terrified. The old iron gate, once heavy and locked tight, was now bent and rusted open, like it had been waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to step inside. When we finally clicked on our flashlights and stepped through, a chill rolled over me that no amount of warmth could shake. The walls were lined with ancient wooden beams, creaking under the weight of time, and scattered across the floor were rusted tools, abandoned like their owners had dropped them in a hurry. As we moved deeper, a faint smell hit me, a damp, metallic tang, mixed with something else, something rotting. Our footsteps echoed, too loud against the deep silence. But every so often, there was this strange creak, like someone or something else was following just a step behind. Then we noticed the symbols. Drawn and smeared, rusty red across the stone, shapes that twisted and curved in ways I couldn't quite make out. They covered the walls in patches, faded but unmistakable. Probably old miners fooling around, Sam whispered, trying to lighten the mood. But Riley's face was tense, her flashlight shaking just slightly as she scanned the tunnel walls. Finally, we stumbled upon a hidden chamber that seemed to open out of nowhere. Inside, the air was thicker, heavier, and every shadow felt alive. There were broken, dusty altars pushed against the walls, each adorned with half-burnt candles and shattered relics, like whoever had been here left in a hurry, or worse, was forced to leave. And in the center of the room was an emblem carved deep into the floor, twisted and unsettling. I told myself it was a joke, some messed up prank, but my gut screamed at me to get out of there. Casey tugged my sleeve, her face pale. "We're not alone," she whispered, barely audible. And in that moment, with every hair on my body standing on end, I knew she was right. The air felt heavier with every step, pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. We'd been in the mine for a while now, and the deeper we went, the more it felt like the shadows were closing in on us. It started with faint noises, whispers that seemed to slither through the air, words in some language I couldn't place, just soft enough to make my skin crawl. And then there were footsteps. Not ours, though. These sounded distant at first, but soon, they started echoing louder, like someone, or something, was following us, always just out of sight. Riley was the first to feel it. She jumped, sucking in a breath, and spun around. Something touched me," she whispered, eyes wide, hand clutching her shoulder. I swear, it was cold, like ice. We all froze, shining our flashlights around, but nothing was there. Just the same endless shadows stretching across the tunnel walls. That's when Sam's flashlight began to flicker, casting eerie, shifting beams across the stone. In the dim, stuttering light, the shadows seemed to ripple, like they were alive, twisting and contorting into shapes that almost looked human, almost. "Let's get out of here," Jordan muttered, his voice strained. We all nodded, desperate to escape whatever was lurking in those tunnels. But when we turned to retrace our steps, the way we came was wrong. Every passageway seemed to twist and turn in ways I didn't remember, leading us deeper instead of out. Jordan tried to take the lead, but each direction only pulled us further into a maze we couldn't escape. The whispers grew louder, and so did the footsteps, closer now, practically breathing down our necks. It was like the walls were closing in, tightening around us, and those unseen eyes were watching, waiting. Every nerve in my body was screaming to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The voices weren't just whispers anymore, they were a chorus, calling out to us, pulling us further into the darkness, almost like they wanted us to stay. Rounding the corner, I froze, my breath catching in my throat. There, barely visible in the weak beam of my flashlight, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. They moved in a way that made my stomach twist, jerky, broken movements, like they were being yanked forward by invisible strings. Their faces were hollow, eyes like pits of darkness, and it felt as if they were looking right through me. My friends were scattered, their shouts echoing down the tunnels, but all I could hear were those figures' whispers, layered over each other like a haunting chant, warning of a curse bound to these mines. One by one, I lost sight of everyone, Jordan's voice fading to the left, Riley's frantic footsteps behind me, then nothing. Just me, alone in the damp, suffocating dark. I ran, hoping I'd find them around the next bend, but instead, I stumbled into a small chamber. My flashlight caught on something old, decayed mounds. I knelt, hands shaking, to see what it was. Rusty pickaxes lay scattered across the ground, surrounded by tattered clothing and scraps of paper. My fingers brushed against the journal, its pages brittle and stained. I flipped it open, struggling to read the smeared ink, but the words sent a chill straight to my bones. The entries were desperate scrawls, tales of other explorers, just like us, who had entered the mines and never made it out. They wrote of the shadows, the voices, and the curse. One line made my blood run cold: the mine chooses who gets to leave. A new wave of whispers washed over me, closer this time, pressing in like a physical force. I looked up, heart pounding, and saw the shadows closing in. Their hollow eyes fixed on me, and I understood. They weren't letting us go. The mine had chosen. Days later, a search team ventured into the mine, but all they found was a single, weathered journal, scratched and torn, lying on the ground. No sign of us, just a handful of our scattered belongings. They searched for days, combing the tunnels, calling out our names, but it was as if we had vanished into thin air. But Ridgeway didn't forget. The stories only grew worse. People started hearing strange things, low whispers that floated through the fog on quiet nights, voices that sounded like pleas or warnings. Locals swore they saw faint beams of light flickering from deep within the mine, as if we were still wandering in there, lost in the endless dark. And then there were the shadows. People passing near the mine's entrance caught glimpses of figures standing just out of sight, unmoving, watching. Shadows that lingered too long, even in broad daylight, before dissolving into the mist. Word spread quickly. Ridgeway's ghost stories became warnings, whispered to anyone foolish enough to get curious. Now, they say the mine is cursed, and for those brave, or reckless, enough to stand close, they'll feel an unnatural chill crawl over their skin, and a heavy, pressing gaze from somewhere deep inside. The journal remains, a relic of that night, worn and faded, its scrawled words the only hint of what happened. And now, every newcomer is told the same thing: those who enter the mine may end up like us, trapped forever with the restless souls of Ridgeway, bound to haunt its depths, waiting for the next unwitting soul to cross the threshold.